Welcome to a world with limitless possibilities. A world where pain and suffering are matched only by the sounds of those who endure it. Welcome to your nightmare.
Welcome to your nightmare.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Nightmare. For tonight I have a story for you about monsters under the bed. So lower the lights, check the locks, and look beneath you. We like to think childhood fears are things we outgrow. Monsters left behind in the toy box of youth. But sometimes, those monsters just wait for us to get bigger. To get heavier, to give them more to consume. This is the weight of the mattress. The human mind is an expert at rationalizing the impossible. When you're lying in the dark, 30 years old with a mortgage, a failing marriage, and a mind frayed by 90-hour work weeks, you don't believe in monsters. You believe in old floorboards. You believe in shifting foundations. You believe in mice. Leo lay on his side, staring at the digital glow of his alarm clock. 3:14 a.m. The numbers bled into the darkness. A harsh neon green. Outside, the rain was a steady, rhythmic drumming against the window pane of his new, suspiciously cheap suburban rental. Then came the sound. It wasn't a sharp sound. It was dull, muffled by layers of synthetic fabric and dust ruffles. It sounded like a thick, blunt fingernail dragging slowly across the underside of the box spring. Leo didn't move. He didn't breathe. He froze, his eyes wide, staring at the empty expanse of the bedroom wall. It's a mouse, he told himself. A rat. The landlord lied about the extermination. But mice are frantic. Mice are fast, chaotic, driven by the frantic, trembling heartbeat of a prey animal. This sound was deliberate. It dragged from the headboard toward the foot of the bed, a slow, agonizingly patient scrape that lasted a full 10 seconds before stopping. Then the mattress shifted. It was subtle, but undeniable. The foam beneath Leo's hip compressed slightly, as if something heavy beneath the bed had leaned its weight upward, pressing against the slats. Leo's pulse hammered in his ears, a deafening thud. He forced himself to sit up. The movement was explosive in the quiet room. The sheets rustled loudly, a violent protest against the silence. He swung his legs around. He didn't let his feet touch the floor. He hovered them, a sudden primal instinct, screaming at him to keep his flesh away from the dark perimeter beneath the frame. He reached for the lamp on the nightstand. His fingers fumbled, slick with cold sweat before clicking the switch. Warm yellow light flooded the room. The silence returned, absolute and heavy. The room looked entirely ordinary. His clothes were draped over the accent chair. His laptop sat closed on the desk. His shoes were neatly lined up by the closet. Everything was exactly where it belonged. Leo let out a long, ragged breath, a shuddering laugh escaping his throat. Get a grip, he muttered to the empty room. He leaned over the edge of the mattress, lowering his head, and lifted the dust ruffle to look beneath the bed. There was nothing, just a few dust bunnies. The darkness banished the ambient light of the lamp, and the bare hardwood floor. He felt a wave of profound relief, mixed with embarrassment. He was a grown man trembling over a house settling. He climbed back into bed, left the lamp on, and eventually fell into a fitful, dreamless sleep. He didn't notice that the shoes by his closet were no longer neatly lined up. One of them was pointing towards the bed. The second night, the sound didn't wait for 3 a.m. Leo had gone to bed early, exhausted from a day of staring at spreadsheets that made his eyes ache. He turned off the light at 11 p.m., determined to get a full night's rest. He was drifting on the precipice of sleep, that hazy twilight where thoughts become fluid and illogical, where he felt the dip. It wasn't a sound this time. It was a sensation. The mattress sank. It wasn't the uniform sink of a body tossing and turning. It felt as though a localized, immense weight, like a heavy bowling ball or massive, leaden hand, was pressed into the center of the bed from directly underneath. The foam contorted, pulling the sheets, taut, across Leo's legs. He bolted upright, slapping the lamp switch instantly. The room flooded with light. The mattress popped back into its original shape. "Who's there?" Leo cried out, his voice cracking, thin and terrified. No response. He grabbed his phone, using the flashlight feature to peer under the bed again. Nothing. Empty space. But as he pulled his head back up, he noticed something on the floorboard near the headboard. It was a smear. A dark oily residue, no larger than a coin, that smelly faint of copper and stagnant water. He reached down and touched it. It was cold, viscous. He wiped it on tissue, his hands shaking so violently, he nearly dropped the phone. Leo didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat in the center of the bed, his back pressed against the headboard, his knees pulled tightly to his chest. He kept the lights on, watching the floorboards, waiting for something to reach out from the shadows. By morning, the exhaustion had turned into a low-grade paranoia. At work, he couldn't focus. Every time a colleague stepped up from behind his cubicle, he flinched. He drank 4 cups of black coffee, but the caffeine only made his anxiety vibrate at a higher frequency. When he returned home that evening, the air in the house felt different. It felt thick, humid, and carried a subtle, sour odor that reminded him of wet wool left in a dark closet for too long. He decided to investigate. He pulled the mattress entirely off the frame, dragging it onto the living room floor. He dismantled the wooden slats of the bed frame, examining every inch of the wood and the floor beneath it. Nothing. No hidden patches, no crawl spaces, no structural damage. Just ordinary interlocking pieces of pine. But when he went to put the bedroom back together, he realized something was missing. He left his watch, a silver chronograph his father had given him, on the nightstand the night before. It wasn't there. He searched the floor, the drawers, the blankets. It was gone. And then he looked closer at the dust under the bed frame before he put it back. There were tracks. Not paw prints, not footprints. Long, wide drag marks in the dust, as if something very wide and very flat had dragged itself out from the wall, toward the center of the room and back again. The drag marks ended precisely where the oily smear had been the night before. Leo bought a security camera. It was a small black cube with night vision, designed to stream video directly to his phone. He set it up on the bookshelf opposite his bed, angling it down so it captured the entire room, including the narrow gap between the bottom of the bed frame and the floor. "Let's see you rationalize this," he whispered to the empty room as he climbed into bed on the third night. He left the bedroom door open, hoping the light from the hallway would offer some comfort. He kept his phone in his hand, the screen dimmed, the live feed of the camera open. Hours passed, the house grew cold. The heating vent clicked off, leaving the room in silence so profound, Leo could hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock just downstairs. At 2:42 a.m., the live feed on his phone glitched. The screen stuttered, a wave of green static washing across the night vision display. Leo sat up, slightly, staring at the screen. The static cleared, and what he saw made the breath freeze in his throat. On the screen, the gap under his bed was no longer empty. Something was emerging. It didn't have a face, not in the traditional sense. It looked like a mass of wet, matted hair and gray, leathery flesh, shifting and folding on itself like an origami shape made of meat. It was impossibly wide, yet flat enough to squeeze through the 4-inch clearance between the floor and the bed frame. It poured out like spilled oil. Leo looked at his phone, staring at the actual floor at the foot of his bed. In the dim hallway light, he saw it. The air itself seemed to curdle. A shape darker than the darkness around it was sliding out from under the bed. It didn't make a sound. No scritch, no creak. It had learned that sounds woke him up, so it stopped making them. It was long, easily 6 or 7 feet, but it possessed no discernible limbs. Instead, long, multi-jointed protrusions resembling human fingers, but elongated to the lengths of tree branches extended from its sides, pulling its mass forward with sickening liquid grace. Leo was paralyzed. His muscles refused to obey him. The terror was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, locking his jaw. The entity paused at the foot of the bed. It began to rise. It didn't let itself up. It unfolded. It stretched upward like a shadow cast by a moving flame, growing taller and thinner until it reached the ceiling. The head, or the area where a head should be, tilted down towards him. Leo could see its surface now. It wasn't hair. It was thousands of thin black threads, vibrating at a frequency so high they appeared blurry. And nestled within those threads were things it had taken. He saw the glint of his father's watch embedded in its leathery flank. He saw a missing sock. He saw a set of keys he had lost months ago. The monster was an accumulator of lost things, a hoarder of the forgotten. The creature reached out one of its long skeletal fingers. The tip of the digit was wet and capped with a blunt, cracked nail. It hovered inches from Leo's bare foot, which was peeking out from beneath the comforter. The phone in Leo's hand vibrated. A low battery warning. The sharp buzz exploded in the quiet room. The creature reacted with blinding speed. It didn't retreat under the bed. It collapsed backwards, its body flattening into a thin sheet of darkness that slid up the wall, vanishing into the shadow of the ceiling corner. Leo screamed a raw animal sound and ran. He didn't grab his keys, he didn't grab his shoes. He burst through the front door into the pouring rain, sprinting down the asphalt of his suburban street, screaming for help until his lungs burned and his feet bled. The police thought he was having a psychotic break. They found him shivering under a bus stop awning 2 miles from his house, drenched, hysterical, and speaking in fragmented riddles about shadows and watches. They took him to a hospital where a sympathetic doctor administered a sedative and checked him for narcotics. When he woke up, the sun was shining through a sterile, white-tiled window. His sister, Clara, was sitting on a chair beside the bed, her pale face with worry. "Leo," she whispered, grabbing his hand. "What happened? The police said you were raving." "There's something in the house, Clara," Leo said, his voice hoarse. He gripped her hand with terrifying strength. "Under the bed. It's not a joke. It's not a hallucination. I have it on video. Check my phone." Clara looked uneasy. She reached into her purse and pulled out his phone, which the police had recovered from his bedroom floor. "The police looked at it, Leo. There's nothing on here." Leo snatched the phone and opened the security app. He scrolled through the cloud recordings from the previous night. The footage at 2:42 a.m. was gone. There was only a 30-minute block of pure, unadulterated static, followed by a shot of an empty room with the front door swinging open. "It distorts it," Leo whispered, the realization sinking in like a stone in his stomach. "The electronics, it changes them." "Leo, you've been working yourself to death," Clara said gently, placing a hand on his forehead. "Since the divorce, you haven't slept. You're having night terrors, severe ones. The doctor said sleep deprivation can cause vivid tactile hallucinations." Leo looked at his sister. He wanted to believe her. More than anything in the world, he wanted to believe he was crazy. Being crazy meant he could take a pill. Being crazy meant he was safe. "Okay," Leo lied, letting his head fall back onto the pillow. "Maybe you're right." He spent 3 days in the hospital. They gave him a prescription for anti-anxiety and sleeping pills. When he was discharged, Clara offered to let him stay at her place, but Leo refused. He had a house full of possessions, a job he couldn't abandon, and a burning, stubborn need to prove himself that his mind was whole. Before he returned home, he went to a hardware store. He spent $500 on industrial-grade lighting. He bought halogen work lights, LED strips, and high-intensity floodlights. If the thing lived in the dark, he would simply destroy the dark. When he entered his rental house, the sour smell was stronger. It hung in the air like a physical fog, tasting of rot and old iron. He ignored it. He went straight to the bedroom. He dragged the bed frame out from the room entirely and threw it into the backyard. He placed his mattress directly on the center of the floor. Then he set up the lights. He positioned 4 halogen work lights at 4 corners of the room, angling them so their beams crossed directly over the mattress. He taped LED strips along the baseboards, ensuring there was not a single square inch of shadow along the perimeter of the floor. When he turned them all on, the room was blinding. It was brighter than a surgical theater. The heat from the bulbs was immediate, baking the air and making the room feel like a greenhouse. "Let's see you hide now," Leo said, his eyes watering from the intense glare. He took one of his prescribed sleeping pills, swallowed it with a warm glass of water, and lay down in the center of the illuminated stage. He wore sunglasses to block out the blinding white light, but even through the dark lenses, the room was a radiant oasis. He felt safe. The light was absolute. There was nowhere for a shadow to exist. He closed his eyes, the heavy sedative pulling him under within minutes. Leo woke up because he was cold. That didn't make sense. The halogen bulbs should have made the room feel like a sweat lodge. But his breath was pluming in the air in front of his face, a white mist that hung suspended in the glare. He pushed his sunglasses up onto his forehead. The lights were still on. The halogens were humming, their filaments vibrating with electricity, casting their intense violet and white light across the room. But something was wrong with the light. It wasn't reaching the floor. Leo watched in horror as the light seemed to bend. The beams from the corners of the room traveled through the air, but as they neared the mattress, they curved upwards, as if deflected by an invisible gravitational force. And then he noticed the mattress itself. The edges of the mattress were normal, bathed in the white glare, but the center, the exact spot where Leo was lying, was turning black. Not because the light was off, but because the fabric of the mattress was bleeding a dark ink-like substance. The sour smell was overwhelming now. A suffocating stench of ancient dust and decay that filled his throat, making him gag. The sound didn't come from below him. It came from inside the mattress. The foam beneath his back began to churn. It felt like a nest of thousands of writhing microscopic insects shifting beneath the fabric. Leo tried to roll off the mattress, but his body wouldn't move. The sleeping pill had left his limbs leaden and unresponsive. His nervous system disconnected from his brain. A tear appeared in the center of their mattress, right between his legs. The fabric didn't rip. It parted like a pair of dry lips opening for a breath. From the tear, a finger emerged. A long, gray, multi-jointed finger, capped with a blunt, cracked nail. It was followed by another, and then another. The monster wasn't under the bed. The bed was just the doorway. The monster was the space beneath it. It was the gravity of his loneliness, the accumulated weight of his fears, the dark matter that filled the voids of his life. The creature began to pour out of the mattress, unfolding itself from the very foam he slept on. It rose above him, blocking out the curved, corrupted beams of the halogen lights. Leo stared up into the mass of vibrating black threads. He could see his father's watch, ticking away, the second hand moving in its perfect synchronization with his own heart racing. He saw other things now, things he hadn't noticed before. A pair of baby shoes, a wedding ring, a pair of glasses. The creature was made of endings. It was made of the things that are left behind when a life falls apart. "Please," Leo whispered, a single tear escaping his eye and rolling down into his ear. The entity didn't have a mouth, but a sound issued from the center of its mass. It was a sound Leo recognized. It was the sound of his ex-wife crying in the next room. It was the sound of his mother's final rattling breath in the hospital. It was the sound of every door that had ever been shut in his face. The long skeletal fingers reached down and wrapped around Leo's ankles. They were impossibly cold, freezing his skin on contact. The creature didn't pull him down. It began to pull itself into him. The gray, leathery flesh slithered over his legs, a heavy, suffocating blanket of meat and hair. The black threads began to burrow into his pores, stinging like 1,000 tiny needles. Leo opened his mouth to scream, but the threads poured into his throat, filling his mouth with the taste of copper, dust, and old iron. The halogen lights hummed in the corner of the room, casting their brilliant, useless light against the walls. In the center of the room, the mattress was empty. Clara stood in the bedroom, her hand covering her mouth. The police were behind her, taking notes. The room was chaotic. 4 industrial work lights were knocked over, their bulbs shattered on the hardwood floor. The mattress sat in the center of the room, slashed open, the foam inside gutted and scattered like snow. "We found his car keys, his wallet, and his phone," the detective said, his voice flat, exhausted by the bizarre nature of the scene. "But your brother is nowhere to be found. No signs of forced entry. No blood, just this mess." Clara walked over to the mattress. She knelt down, ignoring the dust and the glass shards. She looked into the dark cavity where the foam had been torn away. Something caught her eye. Deep within the springs of the mattress, tangled in a web of dust and rusted wire, was a silver object. She reached in and pulled it out. It was a silver chronograph watch. She recognized it instantly. It was her father's, but Leo had told her he had lost it months ago. As she held the watch, she noticed something else. On the back of the silver casing, scratched into the metal with what looked like a blunt, frantic nail, were 4 words. "It needs more weight." Clara dropped the watch, a shiver running down her spine. The bedroom suddenly felt incredibly cold. She looked down at the floor beneath her feet. For a fleeting, terrifying second, she thought she felt the floorboards dip. She stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs, and looked at the empty space beneath the window. The sun was setting outside, and the shadows were beginning to grow. The next time you lie down to sleep and you feel that subtle, comfortable sink of your mattress, ask yourself a question. Is it your weight that's pressing it down? Or is it something from below pulling you in? That is all for this episode of Nightmare. I do hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and if you like what you hear, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, sleep well.